Susie Charkey, and today I'm here with Bree Shanahan, STAR's presidential candidate for the Guild 2020 election. So, Bree, I'd just like to start off by asking, what are the steps that led up to here, and how long have you been involved with the Guild? If you could just, talk about that.
Sure. So I first got involved in the Guild in 2015 as a fresher, and I ran for OGC with Launch. Didn't really enjoy it, and I think ultimately decided my values didn't really align with Launch. So I took it some time off. I was pretty disillusioned with the process. But then in 2017, when I was president of St George's College, I got approached to run for the STAR. Decided I may as well put my hat in the ring. That year was the year the Change the Course report was released, and I was pretty disappointed with the response from the university and the colleges, and I really wanted the opportunity to be able to have my voice heard. So I ran with STAR, ultimately became Vice President of the Women's Department, was Women's Officer this year, and now I'm here.
So you've done a lot of things with the Women's Department this year. Did you just want to talk about some of the things you've achieved?
Sure. So, the Women's Department is a little bit complicated because we do lots of things in different spaces. So there's, of course, the outward-facing space where we engage with students. So we have things like Screw Week and Women's Week, which is really about engaging the community in the Women's Department through things like bringing sexual health coordinators on campus to chat to them about sexual health and women's reproductive health, through to really celebrating our women and non-binary community through things like the Women's Week Festival that happened a couple of weeks ago. There's then also the women's collectives, which function as a community building group through low barrier activities like learning how to knit or painting a terracotta pot, so that you can meet other women on campus and form a strong community and support network. The side that I found really eye-opening this year is the part where we engage with the university on things like safety on campus, and in particular lighting on campus. This year, something that I've been really proud of, which I definitely can't take credit for, I think it's been the work of women's officers over tens of years, is securing an order of lighting on campus that's been completed. And the funding, I believe, has been allocated, and the improvement should be carried out this year. I've also been really proud to bring in the women's workshops this semester with the Women's Council Chair Pauline Chihuahua, which was focused on upskilling women through things like life skills, tackling the confidence gap, personal branding, those kinds of things. So we're trying to take more of a focus on how women present themselves in a professional setting. And we're really lucky that a member of UWA alumni contacted us after that to expand it next year and really have those professional connections in 2020.
Wow, so definitely sounds like you've been doing a lot of good stuff with the Guild already. So why do you want to be the Guild president for 2020?
Sure.
Big question there.
Excuse me. I think really the main reason that I got involved was because I felt that as a student I could be overlooked by the university quite frequently. So as I mentioned, when the Change the Course report came out, I was quite disappointed with the response then. I was disappointed when 12-week semesters came in, and I was disappointed this year when they allowed Bettina Arndt on campus, a rape apologist, instead of protecting survivors. And I think the Guild can and should do more to ensure that we're representing every voice on campus. And so I'm really passionate about ensuring every student has the opportunity to present their opinion to the Guild, and for us to be really responsive to students' needs and concerns through things like town hall meetings, which are really simple forums to catch up and discuss what's happening in the Guild space and the university space, give us feedback on where we can improve so we can take those and work them into our goals and ensure that we're always being there for students.
STAR has been under has taken leadership for several years now. So what do you think some of the strengths of this continued leadership are, and what are some of its weaknesses?
I think the strengths are that we have had the time to get to know people within the university, as well as have a really great understanding of how the Guild functions. So we've been to things like Academic Board and the Safer Communities Working working group. We have those connections and relationships with people, and we know the procedures that the university and the guild has to go through to get things done, which means we're able to function within that environment to really advocate for what students need on campus. I think one of the weaknesses of being in power for so long is that sometimes people just do want to change, or they may see STAR as leadership that has been going on for so long, and they just want to see some new faces or something like that. I think in saying that you shouldn't vote for change in itself, I think you should make a really considered vote and think about whether change is actually necessary in this election.
Okay, great. So now we're going to move on to more policy questions. So I guess each year, each party puts a lot of policies forward. In the past, Launch has promised $2 midi, STAR has promised ferry system, and some of these are more realistic than others, and some eventuate, and some others fall through. Given that students, they come and they vote for STAR and they trust that these will be fulfilled, how can you kind of reconcile if things really don't play out how they plan to?
For sure. I think something to keep in mind is that we haven't reached the end of our term yet. There is still 2 months after the election in which we'll still be advocating for those things that we've spoken about previously. Things like the ferry to business school is actually in Transperth's long-term plan, and it is something that may eventuate depending on how they come along with it, and it's something that the Guild does advocate for, is improving public transport. I think a lot of the time policy concentrates on things that aren't directly within the Guild's control, so things like lobbying Transperth to improve public transport or improving lighting on campus, and those are things that STAR has a long-term vision for, because we know, if I could go out and change all the infrastructure on campus and put in new light bulbs myself, it's something that I would do. Yeah. But unfortunately, we just don't own the university land to be able to do that. This year, we've had a really strong focus on what we can conceivably achieve within the next 12 months. So things like our $12.50 meal deal. We've gone to the managing director and the associate director of commercial to ask what the most reasonable price we could reduce those meals to would be, and he said $12.50. So that's something we can conceivably do within the tab. And beyond that, the other things that we've also taken to them to ensure that they are things that are achievable and realistic, so that we're not over-promising to students what we won't be able to achieve in the following year. And of course, everything we do is things that we expect to be able to do next year, and I don't think being ambitious is necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, for sure. Just so the students get a feel of what STAR stands for, what's one policy, if you could just pinpoint one policy that you're really passionate about that you are very certain will eventuate and is realistic, can occur?
For sure. I think something we've heard a lot this year is that students feel disconnected with their guild and don't feel like the guild is necessarily as responsive or as representative as it can be, and that's why we've decided to introduce town hall meetings and office bearer consultation hours. And these are things that don't have a cost. It just involves making ourselves available, making the space available for students to come down and let us know their thoughts. Outside of that, we want to be more proactive about it, so it's not just about students coming to us, but also about us going to students. And I think, once again, that's something we can do for free. That's always working towards improving the guild. So I think it's really a realistic, tangible policy.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that STAR can guarantee they'll deliver for next year. All right, so moving on to some of your educational policies. So STAR has always says that education is #1 priority. So this year, some of STAR's policies include promising the 0-week introduction to semester, and as well as the additional study break. So given that, last year, one of your key educational policies, which was bringing back the 13th week of semester, failed. What makes STAR think that this is worth pursuing with the university and is possible to change?
Sure. So I think 13-week semesters is obviously an issue that has dragged out over a long period of time, and it is something that Star Guild after Star Guild has been dealing with and trying to find a solution to. So originally we thought that we could keep fighting for a 13th week, and as the year has gone on, it's become increasingly clear to us that that's not something the university is willing to budge on. However, Conrad and Lincoln have been working hard this year. They put forward a report that looked at the impact that 12-week semesters has had on students, and as a result of that, the university is conducting a review of their academic calendar. So ideally, we would keep pushing for a 13th week through things like, as we say, working with the university, using the institutional knowledge and connections that we have to really advocate for what students need. But alternatively, things like week 0 and a second study break are realistic policies that can make a big difference. So I think week 0, for example, is just asking unit coordinators to put up materials a week early, things that you would ordinarily go through in your first lecture, so how to access LMS, your assessment, breakdown, those kinds of things. That shouldn't be something that's too hard for them to do, and it's something that could really relieve the pressure of 12 weeks. And we're already working towards that, so I'm quite confident that's something that we can achieve next year. Same with the study breaks, that's something that happens at many universities across WA and across Australia, so I don't think it's too much to ask the university to do that.
Okay, thank you. So I guess we'll be moving on to some of the questions that students put forward in the specific response forms. So a lot of concern is coming about club culture on campus and how it's a lot of students feel that it's diminishing, especially in terms of like party clubs, and so what like specific plans do you have to revitalise club culture, given that clubs' needs are not homogenous, and they each need different, they each have different needs that need to be catered for.
Definitely. So this year, the current SOC president, Tako Shireishi, has been conducting consultations with clubs to find out where they think we're going wrong, or where they think this issue is coming from, and how the guild can support them in resolving it. And some quite good ideas have come out of that. We kicked it off this semester by bringing in grants for clubs to collaborate with the guild on Guild Day. So pursuing those kinds of collaborations and supporting clubs in what they do is really important to us. Year after year, START has increased funding to clubs. This year we increased it by $80,000, and we brought in new resources like venue guides, the club's directory, which already existed, so that people can find the clubs they really want to engage with. And I think it's really important to me and to the STAR team to continue to do that, because clubs know how to do what they do best, and we just really want to be there to be able to support them. So I guess the most tangible policy we have in that area is engaging in more collaborations for things like orientation festivals through guild events, and just maintaining a strong line of communication and being more proactive in terms of the guild calendar, so we see that when similar clubs are overlapping with their events, we get in touch to ensure that we can be as proactive as possible to ensure we're not crossing over in those kinds of areas.
Great. So should you be elected next year as guild president, how would you feel and how would you compromise working with launch office bearers? Would that be an issue, or you're not really concerned?
Sure. Personally, I'm not really concerned about it. I think ultimately Guild Council is a board of directors of quite a sizable organisation that requires that you be professional. This year I've worked with launch office bearers and with launch ODCs and launch members of committees. We're all there at the end of the day to ensure that students are getting the best outcomes from their guild. We may have ideological disagreements at times, but I don't think that should ever impact on how you engage in a professional setting.
Yeah. So, what do you say to the people that consider the guild, I guess, to be, I suppose, for lack of a better term, this was thrown around a bit, a popularity contest, and creates like an insular body of reps? Is there any kind of reform that, or is that an area of reform you think is worth pursuing? Or
Definitely. I think this year the STAR team really actively worked to look outside of people from the guild bubble to ensure that we're representing all areas of campus. So a lot of our office bearers haven't been involved in the guild before. People like Costa and Emma have backgrounds in FACSOX but not in the guild space, and we thought it was really important to bring in people like that have fresh ideas for the guild. I think a really interesting reform that I saw at ANU this year was to bring in expression of interest forms, so students who wanted to get involved in the guild but didn't know how could submit a form for tickets to have a look at, and they could get involved in that way instead of the sort of tapping on the shoulder culture that we have at the moment. And personally, that's something I'd really like to explore next year, because I think everyone should have the opportunity to get involved, and that shouldn't be on a partisan level. It should always be about ensuring that you can have your voice heard and ensuring that you're representing the students around you.
Well put. So last year's elections came pretty close. I believe it was 9 votes or something with following the launch. Why do you think that occurred, and how confident are you of STAR's victory this year? I mean, for 2020.
Sure.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think there are many reasons why, and I think a lot of them are reasons that maybe Anthony Green or like a political analyst could go into. I think probably a lot of it comes down to what we were talking before about STAR having been in power for many years, and the line that you need change can be a really effective line if you're just going to roll it out at some point. But I think what matters to me is having tangible action points behind those policies that do mean change for students. And that's what we've really focused on this year, is creating policies that are aiming to achieve something beyond just what the line says, whether that's improving mental health or improving campus culture. It's not, the end goal isn't just increasing club funding, the end goal is and improving our clubs and supporting our clubs. So it should always be about the bigger picture, not just the in the moment change is better one-liner. I think you should be thinking about the bigger picture.
Awesome. Okay. So any final comments for those watching and for those voting in this year's election?
Sure. I think make sure you're making an informed decision, make sure you think about the bigger picture, have a read of our website, and not to be too biased, but make sure you vote for an independent, progressive and experienced ticket and vote one star.
Thank you very much, Bree, for your time, and